68% of fund managers think a recession is unlikely in 2020. So that brings up the question about whether or not this rally has kind of room to run. From Forbes Media, the Forbes Media chairman, Steve Forbes, is here with us this hour. It's always good to see Steve. From the New York Post editorial page assistant, Brooke Rogers. And from the Independent Women's Forum, senior fellow Beverly Hallberg. Now, Beverly joins us from Washington. Well, Brooke and Steve are here in New York. Steve, we'll start with you on, it's become a kind of running joke. Every day the stock market goes higher. So on that point, what do you make of this kind of run we're on for stocks?
Well, what a contrast to a year ago when everyone thought, oh, we're going into a terrible bear market,
right,
recession coming, Trump is doomed, all that sort of thing. And now it's the opposite. I'm almost sad to see Bank of America survey say 68%. That's usually a bearish sign that everyone now is starting to get optimistic.
Well, do you think people aren't getting a little too optimistic at this point, or no?
A little, but I think what's good is they're finally doing something on the trade front, so we're getting that uncertainty out of the way. Trump's going to propose tax cut 2.0, so that's going to help on the campaign side. They're going to make some proposals, hopefully good ones, on the health care side. So the Republicans know where they're vulnerable, and that means the Democrats won't win the election, which will be good for the economy. If it looks like the Democrats are going to win, taking the Senate or winning the White House, you're going to see the markets react to it in anticipation of bad things to come.
All right, I'm going to come back to that point in a moment. What do you think, Brooke? This has been it's been a remarkable run. Look at that chart at the end. You're almost waiting for it down a day-by-day basis to kind of come to an end, but it keeps going up and up, especially the tech stocks.
And just in September, Bank of America released the same survey, which said that 40% of hedge fund managers thought a recession was likely, and that was the highest number since 2009. So it's clear that there has been a pivot here. That's partially because of the trade war, and that's partially because of the Fed cutting tax rates, cutting rates instead of raising them. So we are seeing a positive push.
Yeah, the Fed's definitely been there. It's been and continues to back us. Beverly, your take quick, and I'm going to come back to, or you can pick it up yourself. I'm going to come back to Steve's point on politics as well, what it means for 2020. But Beverly, first on the markets. How about it?
Well, yeah, the stocks are responding well to this first draft trade deal. We still need to see all the details that are in there. What I'm most interested in seeing and how this responds is also what happens to the farming agricultural community. That is a sector that's been hardest by the trade war, by the tariffs that have been imposed. Are we going to see that the subsidies that have been given to them, are those going to be rolled back as the year continues? So I think in general, I want to see what it means for our American farmers. It's good news for them at this point, but what about the American taxpayer that's been paying for those subsidies? But of course, this is a huge win for President Trump right at the end of the year. And as everyone was saying on the panel, we heard a lot of recession talk this past summer, and here we are. So
yeah,
they
we're not talking that way
wrong
anymore. We really aren't. Before we talk about Boeing, which has become the story of the day in many ways, Steve, on the politics, a really interesting conversation with Arnon Mishkin last hour, who heads up our decision desk at Fox, and he surprised me a little bit, because I know, as I said to him, I know the data shows in head-to-head matchups the president doesn't do well against a number of the Democratic candidates, but I've been hearing from more and more people, as I said to Arnon in the last few weeks, that he looks good for re-election despite that, because impeachment doesn't seem to be hurting him much. The economy, to your point, is getting, has held up very well. The stock market is doing well. And Arnon said that he would still say President Trump is an underdog for re-election. How do you view it?
The only one who can beat Trump is Trump, because everything else is going his way. And if he's able to keep things on a high ground, focus on taxes, health care, what he's achieved here with the economy, doing things, finally bringing China to account, he'll be in a strong position because the Democrats have to run somebody against him. And with their proposals on taxes, which are going to be lethal as people learn more about them, their proposals on taxing your savings and things like that, those are not going to sit well. And one thing that I think has actually helped the market a little bit is the collapse of Elizabeth Warren, or at least declining 50%.
I've heard that from a few people.
As people learn more about what Medicare for All meant and what it meant for taxes, she was hurt.
Yes.
She was hurt.
She
and that shows
started
the American
to fade.
people aren't ready to go the European way.
Right, and investors like that. All right, let's talk, guys, about Boeing. And the announcement came in earlier today that Dennis Muilenburg is out as CEO at Boeing. Now, the stock's up by more than 2.5%. Jackie DeAngelis joins us now on, what all this means for the future of the company, also, of course, for the 737 MAX. Jackie.
Yeah, good afternoon to you, Connell. Great to see you. Look, it was a big move in Boeing today. That was before the open that the announcement came out, this change in leadership. CEO Dennis Muilenburg, he is out. It's effective immediately. immediately. Chairman David Calhoun will take over on January 13th. Now, Hallberg was at the company for 34 years. There was a lot of speculation, though, that he was going to be removed, and this is obviously a very critical time. The company still dealing with the aftermath of those two 737 MAX jet crashes, struggling to determine when that plane is going to get back up in the air. A lot of false alarms with that. Then on Friday, the embarrassing failure with its space launch test as well. So this is being called a fresh start for Boeing on Wall Street. Calhoun is respected at the company, within the industry as well. But the question, of course, is can the company regain trust from regulators and its passengers? That is another question to be seen in 2020. Now, investors seem to believe it's a good step. As you mentioned, the stock trading up almost 3%. And remember, Boeing's a Dow component. So when it sees volatility, it's got a big impact on the market. And despite all the ups and downs, when I crunched the numbers this morning, the stocks is seeing about a 4% gain year to date. And, you know, it was a really volatile year, Connell.
Oh, it was. That's for sure. Jackie, thanks. Brooke, pick up on that, the idea of a fresh start for Boeing with this move. How do you view it?
No, absolutely. I think that obviously it was a terrible year for Boeing. They needed, a head needed to roll. And this is obviously the move that's going to restore confidence in the company and the company's decision-making policies. So I think this is the right move for them, and hopefully it continues and the positivity continues in this area.
Do you think it took too long, Steve, to get to this point?
Yes, should have been 6 months ago. They clearly having problems with regulators. Clearly, they'd made mistakes in the past.
And is removing the CEO enough?
That somebody has to fall on the sword.
Yeah.
And we're going to do things differently, more carefully in the future. Regulators will give you a better hearing now that they think you're responding and not just trying to bull your way through.
Beverly, your take on Boeing?
Well, first of all, I think when you look at 2019, it's been the year of CEOs that have been pushed out. This is a continuation of it. But specifically with Boeing, the FAA chairman has come out and said that they are not going to recertify the 737 MAX until he personally has flown it himself. There are reports that he's going to be doing that later in January, early February. So I do think that if that happens, if we do see this plane recertified, that makes a huge change. I think somebody just needed to fall on the sword for it being grounded this year, and this is the result we're seeing.
Sometimes you say, I asked guests earlier about this, and maybe we're starting to see this today from an investment point of view, that the worst could be behind us. Obviously, that's the hope. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Beverly, that, you know, at least from the stock price's point of view, that you might have seen a bottom in it. We'll see, I guess.
I guess we're going to see. And look, again, I think whenever you have some major issues in a company like we saw this year, Boeing had a horrific year. Yeah. I think people just want to see new blood in there. And sometimes, even if it wasn't the CEO's fault solely, somebody does have to take responsibility for it. We don't always see that in government, people taking responsibility. But in business, you see CEOs often have to take responsibility. And I think that's what we're seeing. You
do. And I think that's why, I think that's why people were surprised it took so long, because Beverly's right. Usually in business, Steve, that's how it works, you know.
And what hurt Boeing was when they changed the chairman's title,
right,
and didn't make the change that everyone knew had to come.
Made Calhoun the chairman at the time.
Yeah, and people thought, oh, they're still trying to keep the old guard in, not really admit what had happened. He did not do one of those hearings in Washington, and so hey, come on, you got to make a fresh start.
Well, it's been a great company for years and years, but this is a terrible period. So we'll see if they can put it behind them. Thank you, guys. We'll have you back to talk about other issues.